Welcome to Module 5, Getting to Know Florida's Aquatic Invasive Species. In this final module, we're going to get to know some of Florida's aquatic invasive species a little better. This is just a small subset of Florida's dozens of invasive plants, fish, invertebrates, reptiles, and more. We'll talk about tilapia, flathead catfish, armored sailfin catfishes, lionfishes, apple snails, green mussels, water spangles, and water hyacinth. Also, pictured on the right is another invasive found in Florida called the giant reed. Tilapia consists of many different species. We have 6 species here in Florida: the blue, Nile, Mozambique, black-chin, spotted, and zebra. Some of them live in freshwater, and some of them can live in saltwater. Depending on the species, their diet, or food preferences, change depending on which stage of life they're in. Some are herbivores, which mean they eat plants. Planktivores, meaning they eat plankton. Others are detritivores, meaning they eat detritus. And sometimes they eat tiny animals like worms, fish, and insects. Tilapia are native to different water bodies and regions of Africa and the Middle East. Blue, Nile, and zebra tilapia are native to freshwater rivers there. And the black-chin, spotted, and Mozambique tilapia are native to brackish coastal and freshwaters there. Many of them can tolerate both freshwater and saltwater, though. Tilapia were introduced to Florida by fish farm escapes, aquarium releases, and intentionally by FWC for research. In Florida, the blue tilapia are highly abundant compared to the other tilapia species. This is mostly because blue tilapia can survive in a large range of water conditions. Tilapia also provide some sort of parental care to their young. The males clear a circular area on the bottom, called a bower, lures in a passing female, and courts her. Some tilapia practice what's called mouth brooding. Depending on the species, either the male or female will suck up the fertilized eggs into their mouth and keep them safe until the babies are big enough and ready to be on their own. Some species are not mouth brooders. Instead, they use a nest, and both tilapia parents protect the developing eggs in the nest. So why are tilapia invasive in Florida? They alter the habitat when they make bowers, and due to their huge numbers, there are a huge number of bowers. As seen in the picture, they sift through the sediment and clear out any plants or invertebrates in the sediment. Bower building increases turbidity during the act of making them, but also the more plants they clear for their bowers, the less roots and shoots from the plants to trap and anchor sediment, which increases turbidity. Plants are very helpful at decreasing turbidity, especially in flowing waters. Additionally, there have been small-scale local increases in the amount of nutrients in the water, like nitrogen and phosphorus, due to the high amount of waste elimination from the tilapia. Next, we have the flathead catfish. In Florida, the flathead catfish lives primarily in the freshwaters of the Panhandle, and it is an opportunistic feeder, meaning it will eat anything it can fit in its mouth, like other fish, insects, frogs, etc. It is native to nearby parts of the United States, like the Mississippi River, Rio Grande River, Ohio River, and Mobile Bay drainage basins. The flathead catfish was most likely introduced by means of spreading south from Georgia's Flint River with the help of introductions by humans. They do provide parental care to their young. During spawning season, they will dig a depression in some type of cavity. The female lays her 100,000 plus eggs in the depression, and the parent fish use their fin movement to lightly disturb the eggs to keep them clean and oxygenated. After the eggs have hatched, the male parent guards the babies for about a week, allowing them some extra protection compared to just sending them off to fend for themselves. The flathead catfish can grow massive in size. The state record is 69.9 pounds, which also means it has a massive appetite. Due to this massive appetite here in Florida, they have actually decreased the number of native sunfish and native bullhead catfish species by directly predating on them. Next are a group called the armored sailfin catfishes, also known as plecos, the common algae eaters used in fish tanks. They live in the freshwater, but they can tolerate low salinity for a little while. This allows them to use the coast and mouths of rivers to move around Florida if need be. They are abundant in most of Florida's subtropical and tropical freshwater bodies, due to their ability to live in a wide range of water conditions. They can also breathe air from the surface and store it in their stomachs when oxygen levels in the water are low. They eat algae and detritus and are native to various tropical and subtropical river basins in South America. In Florida, there are 4 different species established, with hybridization possible, meaning some individuals of one species are breeding with individuals of another species. Hybridization is suspected due to the difficult time biologists are having telling different fish apart from each other. Each species has a distinct pattern on their underside, but some fish have a combination of patterns or even hard to identify patterns. The one pictured here is a vermiculated sailfin catfish. Armored sailfin catfishes also provide parental care to their young. A male will dig a burrow into the sides or bottom of a water body. The female comes in, lays her thousands of eggs, the male fertilizes them, and then he guards the burrow. The burrows, in high numbers, weaken the banks of water bodies, which increases turbidity in the water and helps speed up erosion and undercutting of the banks. Armored sailfin catfishes have been seen eating algae off of manatees. This appears to disturb the manatees because they roll around trying to get the fish off. Additionally, they can increase local nutrient concentrations in springs due to their high amount of waste elimination. Armored sailfin catfishes were introduced in various locations throughout Florida, through the aquarium trade, released into the wild, and escaped from aquaculture ponds in South Florida during storm events that caused flooding. The lionfishes are marine predators, meaning they live in saltwater and actively hunt for their food of live fish and invertebrates. They have an unusual way to eat. They herd their live prey, confuse them by blowing a jet of water into their face. They turn around and then the lionfish engulfs them. The devil firefish is native to the tropical and subtropical Indian Ocean and Red Sea, and the red lionfish is native to the Pacific Ocean. Their native ranges do overlap a little. You can tell them apart by counting their dorsal and anal spines. Speaking of spines, they have venomous spines that are very painful. The spines help defend against predators. In Florida, predators haven't quite recognized lionfish as food yet, so they're very abundant. There are spearfishing derbies to help reduce their numbers, but they can reproduce very young and release millions of eggs a year. It's hard to keep their numbers under control. It's been well studied and documented that lionfish are drastically reducing the number of native species around reefs due to directly predating on them. These were most likely introduced through the aquarium trade and released into the wild. Next are the apple snails. They are freshwater plant and detritus eaters. If they need to, they can tolerate low salinity. They are native to tropical and subtropical Argentina, Brazil, and Bolivia. And Florida does have one native apple snail. The giant, island, and channeled apple snails can reproduce when they're a few months old. Giant apple snails lay green clusters of thousands of eggs above the waterline on plant stalks and other hard surfaces, whereas island and channel apple snails lay pink egg clusters. Their eggs look similar to those of the native apple snail, but with a trained eye, you'll notice the invasive apple snail eggs are smaller than the natives. Their shells are also different sizes and pitches compared to the smaller, flatter, native Florida apple snail. These snails eat up wetland plants through their heavy grazing, and they can carry bacteria, roundworms, and flatworms that are unsafe to human health. The invasive apple snails were introduced through the aquarium trade and intentional releases. The green mussel is a marine filter feeder, so it lives in the saltwater, suctions water through the 2 valves of its shell, and filters out food for itself to grow and pollutants in the water. They are native to the tropical and subtropical range between the Persian Gulf and the Philippines. Just like many of the invasive species we've been looking at, these also reproduce very young at 2 months of age. They grow and multiply so quickly that they grow dents on ships, buoys, and other structures in or along the water. Cleaning them off is not easy or cheap. They clog up stormwater drains and the pipes of power and desalination plants, causing major maintenance and production issues. Also, they displace native oysters by growing in spaces where native oysters would typically grow. It is thought that the green mussels arrived in the port of Tampa Bay from the Indo-Pacific region through the exchange of ballast water on a large ship. Water spangles are a freshwater, free-floating fern native to tropical and subtropical Central and South America. They are tiny, make great hitchhikers, and are difficult to get rid of. This is unfortunately very helpful for them when it comes to spreading around to different water bodies. Not only that, but they also reproduce easily and quickly through fragmentation and budding. This means they don't need other water spangles to reproduce. They can create multiple new plants from one single spangle. Easy methods of reproduction and spread make this a recipe for disaster. In high numbers, they clog water bodies, irrigation channels, and flood control infrastructure. They also shade out vegetation below by multiplying quickly and crowding out space and sunlight needed for anything else to grow. Their large mats make recreation difficult and promote mosquito habitat. It was introduced to Florida most likely as a hitchhiker on a large ship. The water spangle also has a much more threatening look-alike called giant salvinia. It is considered one of the top most invasive aquatic plants in the world and must be removed as soon as it is spotted. Lastly, we have the water hyacinth. It is also a freshwater, free-floating plant. The water hyacinth is easy to grow and has a beautiful purple flower, making it popular in landscape ponds. It is native to tropical Brazil. Water hyacinth grows so incredibly fast that it can double its size in 2 weeks. It can reproduce using runners to produce new plants or by seeds. Due to its aggressive growth rate, it creates dense mats on the water's surface, which shades out vegetation below. This also reduces the amount of dissolved oxygen in the water for other wildlife to use, and makes recreation difficult. This plant is highly managed in Florida and worldwide. It was introduced intentionally to the St. Johns River in the 1880s for its beauty. It didn't take long to clog up most of Florida's waterways. Here are some guides to help you identify and learn more about aquatic invasive species of Florida. Now that we understand the invasion process, how species travel around the world, their impacts, and we have numerous resources to help us, we can work together to prevent future invasions.